Have you ever dreamt of casting off the shackles of ordinary life, answering the call of the open ocean, and chasing a horizon that promises absolute freedom? Tonight, we're stepping onto the weathered deck of a Golden Age pirate vessel, but this is no simple tale of treasure maps. As we join this crew, I'm so glad you're here with us. We have such an incredible community growing, and it always makes my night to see where everyone is tuning in from. So, as you settle in, please feel free to share what time it is for you and where in the world you're listening from tonight. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, find a comfortable spot, let your mind drift, and prepare for an unforgettable journey. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you unwind and gently fall asleep. Tonight, we answer that call. We join the brethren of the coast and discover what the pirate life was really like. Our story begins not on the sea, but in the crowded, grimy ports of the old world, and with the desperate reasons a person would choose to raise the black flag. To understand the pirate, we must first understand the world they fled. It was a world of suffocating order, grime, and breathtaking cruelty, especially for a common sailor. Picture the docks of London or Bristol in the early 18th century. The air is thick with coal smoke, the smell of the low tide, and the sharp, acrid scent of rope tar. For an able-bodied man, just walking down these cobblestone streets was a gamble. Around any corner, a press gang from the Royal Navy might be waiting. This was the ever-present terror of impressment. It was, in truth, a form of legal kidnapping. A group of naval officers, often armed with clubs, could burst into a tavern, seize any man who looked seaworthy, and drag him into service. One moment you might be sharing a pint of ale with a friend. The next, you are waking with a splitting headache in the dark, cramped forecastle of a man-o'-war. You are now the property of the king, perhaps for years, perhaps for life. And this life was brutal. Your new home, the forecastle, is a cramped, dark space, shared with 100 other men. The air is heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies of damp wool that never fully dries, and the stomach-turning odor of bilge water seeping up from the ship's bottom. You sleep in a swaying hammock, packed so tightly against your neighbors that you can feel their every breath. The constant, bone-chilling dampness seeps into your clothes, into your bedding, and into your very bones. Nothing is ever truly dry. The sound that rules this wooden world is the sharp, piercing shriek of the boatswain's whistle. It is a sound that never promises rest. It signals a change of the watch, a call to haul ropes in a freezing gale, or, worst of all, a summons for punishment. Discipline in the Royal Navy was not meant to correct, it was meant to inspire terror. The captain's word was absolute law, and any infraction, real or imagined, was met with the lash. The tool of this terror was the cat o' nine tails. This was a whip made of 9 knotted ropes, each one designed to bite and tear the skin. A man would be tied to the ship's grate, his back bared to the entire crew. The boatswain's mate would lay on the lashes, one by one, the wet thud of the knots, followed by the sharp intake of breath. A dozen lashes could leave a man scarred for life. 50 could cripple him. It was a ritual of pain designed to break the spirit. Your reward for this service was, effectively, nothing. The pay for a common sailor was appallingly low. But the true insult was that it was often months, or even years, in arrears. It was not uncommon for a sailor to serve for 3 years, only to find his wages stolen by a corrupt purser. the officer in charge of supplies, who would claim the sailor had been paid in advance or had taken supplies he never received. And then there was the food. The diet of a naval sailor was infamous. The staple was the hardtack biscuit. This was a simple, unleavened cracker, baked as hard as a piece of wood so it would not spoil. It was often baked years in advance and stored in barrels. When you received your biscuit, you would tap it on the table. This was not a nervous habit. It was a practical necessity, done to knock the black weevil bugs and their larvae from the tunnels they had bored inside. You would eat it in the dark, so you would not have to see what you were chewing. This was served with salted beef or pork, meat so heavily brined that it was as tough as a wooden shingle and often tinged with green. It had to be soaked in seawater for hours just to become chewable, and it tasted of nothing but old salt and rancid fat. This diet of dry, insect-filled bread and rotting meat inevitably led to sickness. Scurvy was the great plague of the sea, a slow, agonizing decay caused by a lack of vitamin C. It would begin with a profound weariness, then your gums would turn black and spongy, your teeth loosening in their sockets. Old wounds, even ones that had healed decades prior, would mysteriously reopen. Typhus and dysentery, born from the filth and close quarters, would sweep through the lower decks, killing far more sailors than cannon fire ever would. In this rigid, floating prison, there was no hope for a better life. The hierarchy was an unbreakable iron wall. A common man, no matter how skilled or brave, could never dream of becoming an officer. That world was reserved for the sons of gentlemen, for those with money and political connections. You were born to haul ropes, and you would die hauling ropes. Now, imagine the end of a long, brutal conflict, like the War of Spanish Succession, which concluded in 1714. Thousands of trained, hardened sailors and privateers, men who had been legally employed to attack enemy shipping, were suddenly unemployed. They were dumped back into these same grimy port cities, skilled only in the arts of sailing and sea combat, with no prospects and no future. It was in this world of utter hopelessness that a different call emerged. It was a whisper, perhaps heard in a sun-drenched tavern in the Caribbean, a story from a man with gold in his pockets and a look of freedom in his eye. It was a story of a different life, a life without press gangs, without the lash, and without corrupt pursers. It was the promise of a life where a man was his own master, a life of one man, one vote, a life where the captain was chosen, not imposed, a life where every man received a fair share of all plunder, guaranteed in writing. This was the pirate's promise for the desperate, beaten down, and forgotten men of the Royal Navy and the merchant service. This was not a descent into lawlessness. It was the only logical choice for a life of dignity, respect, and wealth. From this world of brutal servitude and hopelessness, a different call emerged, a whisper from the warm Caribbean of freedom, democracy, and wealth. It was the call to sign the Articles. You find yourself on the deck of a sleek, fast-looking vessel, anchored in a hidden cove far from the eyes of naval patrols. The sun is warm on your skin, and the air smells of salt, wildflowers, and the faint, sweet scent of rum. The crew is a rough-looking collection of men from all nations, but they move with a sense of ease and confidence you have never seen before. A man steps forward, unrolling a heavy sheet of parchment. He is not a captain, but the quartermaster. The crew had elected him to this position. His job is to represent their interests, to be their voice. The smell of rum is faint on his breath as he speaks, his voice friendly but firm. He explains that this document contains the ship's articles. This is a binding written contract that lays out the rules of their society. Every man who wishes to join the crew must sign his name, or, if he cannot write, make his mark upon it. As he begins to read the rules, you realize you are witnessing a revolution. The very first article is the most astonishing. Every man on board has a vote in the ship's affairs. One man, one vote. This was a concept that was centuries ahead of its time. Back in England, only wealthy landowning men had any say in the government. Here, on this small wooden ship, even the lowest sailor had a voice equal to the captain's. The captain, he explains, is also elected by the crew. His power is absolute, but only during a chase or in the heat of a battle. In those moments, his orders must be obeyed instantly. But in all other matters, all major decisions, from where to sail to whether to attack a prize, are put to a majority vote. At all other times, it is the quartermaster, not the captain, who holds the true power. He is the one responsible for distributing provisions, for settling disputes between crewmen, and, most importantly, for dividing the plunder. He is the crew's advocate, a check and balance against the captain's authority. This division of power was a radical idea born from the bitter memory of naval tyranny. The articles continue, and they are a mix of practical rules and strict laws. Lights out at 8 p.m. was a common rule, not to enforce a bedtime, but to conserve candles and reduce the risk of fire. Keep your pistols and cutlass clean and fit for service was a matter of professional pride and survival. No women allowed on board was another frequent rule, designed to prevent jealousy and conflict among the crew. Other articles detailed the codes of conduct, such as no fighting amongst yourselves on the ship. Any disputes were to be settled on shore with pistols or cutlasses. The articles of famous pirates, like Bartholomew Roberts, were famously detailed and strict, and the punishments were clearly defined. They were not subject to the angry, arbitrary whim of a single officer. They were pre-agreed laws that applied to everyone. Theft from a crewmate or desertion during a battle was often met with the same sentence: marooning. This meant being left on a deserted island with nothing but the clothes on your back, a flask of water, some gunpowder, and a single pistol with one shot. It was a choice, a quick end or a slow starvation, a fate that struck terror into the hearts of all sailors. But the most revolutionary part of the articles, the part that truly sets this life apart from the one you fled, is the ship's insurance policy. It was a social safety net, an act of grace for the common man, written into the very fabric of their laws. The quartermaster explains that before any plunder is divided into shares, a sum is first set aside for any man injured in the fight. The articles specified the exact payment: 600 pieces of 8 for the loss of a right leg, 500 for a left leg, 100 pieces of 8 for the loss of an eye or a finger. This was an astonishing provision. In the Royal Navy, a man who lost a leg in service was often discarded, left to beg on the same port streets where he was first impressed. Here, among pirates, his sacrifice was honored and his future was secured. He was a valued member of the community. This system, built on fairness and mutual respect, created a profound and lasting loyalty. This was a crew bound not by fear, but by a shared contract and a common cause. You are handed the quill pen. The parchment is heavy, the ink is black. You look at the names and marks of the men who have signed before you. You are asked to swear the oath, to bind your life to theirs. Some crews swore their oath on a Bible, a strange irony for men declared outlaws by all Christian nations. Others, more dramatically, swore upon a crossed pair of cutlasses, a hatchet, a cannon, or, in some legends, a human skull. You make your mark. The scratch of the pen on the parchment is the sound of your old life ending and a new one beginning. The quartermaster claps you on the shoulder, a grin splitting his face. You are now one of the brethren. With your name on the articles, you are led below deck to find your berth. It is time to be introduced to your new floating home. Your first realization is that this ship is not a towering three-decked man-o'-war. Those ships were built for naval warfare, for long, drawn-out battles. They were slow, cumbersome, and required hundreds of men to sail. Your new home is a sloop, or perhaps a schooner. It is a small, sleek, and nimble vessel, and you learn that pirates overwhelmingly preferred these smaller craft. The reasons were simple, and they were the keys to their entire way of life: speed and surprise. Speed was life. It was needed to chase down the heavy, wallowing merchant ships they hunted. And, just as importantly, it was needed to escape the Royal Navy frigates that hunted them. A pirate ship was built to run, not to fight a pitched battle. The second crucial advantage was its shallow draft. This is the term for how deep the ship sits in the water. A massive naval vessel had a deep draft, meaning it could not sail in shallow waters, but a pirate sloop could. This allowed pirates to hide in remote coves, to slip through uncharted inlets, and to cross over sandbars and reefs where a pursuing naval warship could not possibly follow. It was their greatest defensive advantage. As you look around the deck, you notice it is crowded. This, too, is intentional. The ship is overcrewed. A sloop of this size might normally be sailed by 20 or 30 men. This one carries nearly 100. The goal of a pirate attack was not a long, destructive cannon duel that only damaged the prize and wasted ammunition. The goal was to intimidate, to overwhelm, and to capture the ship with a single, terrifying rush. 100 screaming, heavily armed men appearing on the deck of a merchant ship with a crew of 15 was usually enough to make them surrender without a fight. You begin your tour on the main deck, beneath the tall mast. The tropical sun has warmed the wooden deck planks beneath your bare feet. You see the ship's main armaments. They are not the massive 32-pounders of a naval ship. They are smaller, faster-loading 6-pounder or 8-pounder cannons, just enough to cripple a merchant's rigging. More deadly, you see, are the swivel guns mounted all along the railings. These are small, versatile cannons that can be aimed by a single man. They were not loaded with cannonballs, but with langrage, a spray of scrap metal, nails, glass, and musket balls. They were anti-personnel weapons designed to sweep the deck of an enemy ship and cause maximum chaos. Above you is a beautiful, complex web of ropes, sails, and rigging against the bright blue Caribbean sky. The constant, rhythmic groaning and creaking of the ship's wooden timbers, combined with the snap of the sails in the wind, becomes the new soundtrack of your life. You are led down a narrow hatchway into the belly of the ship. The bright sunlight vanishes, and the air grows thick and heavy. You smell the damp wood, the sharp, pervasive scent of rope tar, and the faint, sweet perfume of rum that seems to emanate from the wood itself. This is the hold. It is packed to the ceiling with casks of fresh water, which are more precious than gold. Alongside them are barrels of rum, which served as both a morale booster and a currency. There are barrels of salted meat and hardtack the same food as the Navy, but here, the quartermaster ensures every man gets his fair share. There are also bolts of sailcloth, spare ropes, and cannonballs. You are shown a special room, deep in the ship, lined with copper. This is the magazine, the powder room. The quartermaster explains the extreme precautions. No metal tools are ever allowed inside. Men who enter must wear special shoes or go barefoot to prevent a single stray spark from a hobnail. The walls are often wetted with damp cloths. A spark in this room would not just be a fire. It would be an instant, catastrophic explosion. At the stern or back of the ship is the great cabin. This is the largest room on the ship, and usually the quarters of the captain. It also serves as the navigation hub, where the charts are laid out and the ship's course is plotted. But you are not quartered there. You are led forward to the forecastle or forecastle. This is the cramped, triangular space in the ship's bow. This is where the crew eats and sleeps. It is filled with hammocks, strung from the low ceiling beams, swaying gently in unison with the ship's constant, rolling motion. The quartermaster explains what will be the hardest and most essential job of all. It is called careening. A ship's speed is its life, but the warm Caribbean waters are full of life. Barnacles, seaweed, and wood-boring worms would constantly attach themselves to the wooden hull below the waterline, creating drag and slowly, day by day, robbing the ship of its speed. So, every few months, the crew must find a secluded beach. They have to unload all the cannons, all the supplies, and then, using ropes and anchors, intentionally pull the massive ship over onto its side in the shallow water. This exposes one half of the hull, which must be painstakingly scraped clean of the marine growth. Then they burn the old tar off and apply a new layer. After that, they have to do the entire back-breaking process all over again for the other side. It is filthy, exhausting, and dangerous work, but it is the secret to their success. It is what keeps them fast. You find your hammock and stow your few belongings. Now familiar with your surroundings, the real work begins. The anchor is weighed, a capstan crew pushing the heavy bars around, chanting a sea shanty. The sails are unfurled, catching the trade winds. The ship heels over, and the sloop points its bowsprit toward the open sea and the hunt. The pirate's life, you soon learn, is not one of constant, thrilling battle. It is a life of waiting, a life of patience, a life of routine. The entire crew is divided into the watch system. This is a fair rotation that shares the workload evenly, perhaps 4 hours on watch and 8 hours off. When you are on watch, you are responsible for sailing the ship, trimming the sails, and keeping a lookout. When you are off, your time is your own. If you are on watch, your most likely post is high above the deck, clinging to the rigging in the crow's nest. You are the ship's eyes. Your job is to scan the horizon, a full 360-degree circle, over and over. You stare at the endless, mesmerizing expanse of the turquoise ocean in every direction. It is hours, sometimes days, of seeing nothing but water and sky. The rhythmic, gentle slap, slap, slap of the waves against the hull is the only sound, a constant companion to your thoughts. Down on deck, the captain and the navigator are at work. In this era, navigation was an art, not a science. They are finding their way by dead reckoning. This is a system of educated guesswork. They use a compass for direction and a log line, a simple rope with knots tied at set intervals, to measure the ship's speed. They mark this guess on a chart. Once a day, exactly at noon, the navigator might use a quadrant or an astrolabe. He uses this to measure the angle of the sun above the horizon. This, combined with a set of charts, can tell him the ship's latitude, its position north or south. But longitude, its position east or west, was almost impossible to determine accurately. It remained a mystery, a matter of experience and luck. The ship, like any wooden vessel, is in a constant state of decay. It is a machine that is always trying to break. Your off-watch hours are often filled with maintenance. You learn to mend torn sails with a heavy needle and a palm, a leather strap that protects your hand. You learn to splice frayed ropes, weaving the strands back together to make them strong. And then there is the most exhausting, endless task of all, pumping the bilge. A wooden ship is never truly watertight. The sea always finds a way in, seeping through the planks. This water collects in the bilge, the very lowest part of the ship, mixing with filth, and refuse to create a foul-smelling soup. It must be pumped back out by hand every single day, or the ship will grow heavy, slow, and eventually sink. To break the long, boring stretches of open ocean, the crew finds ways to pass the time. The ship's musicians, a fiddler, perhaps, or a man with a pipe, strike up a lively tune on the deck as the sun sets. The music is a balm for the soul, a reminder of life beyond the endless water. Elsewhere, men are gambling. They huddle in a circle, rolling dice made of bone or ivory. They often roll them onto a wooden plate, a trick to muffle the sound and keep the dice from scattering across the rolling deck. They bet their shares of plunder that has not even been captured yet. Others sit quietly, telling tall tales of past voyages, or using their knives to carve intricate designs into scraps of wood or bone. This journey into the pirate's world is just beginning, and it makes me wonder what other hidden histories you're curious about. Is there a specific era, or perhaps a lost city or ancient legend you'd love for us to explore together in a future story? Please let me know in the comments. For now, on our sloop, the routine of scan, pump, mend, and wait continues. This can last for weeks. The pursuit of a prize is a slow, patient, strategic game. The sloop is fast, but a merchant ship with a good head start and a favorable wind can take days to run down. The crew must remain vigilant, their weapons clean, their minds sharp, and then it happens. A sound cuts through the air, sharp and piercing, echoing from high above the deck. It is the cry from the lookout in the crow's nest, "Sail ho!" The two words send an electric jolt through the entire ship. Boredom vanishes in an instant. It is replaced by a focused, predatory anticipation. Men who were sleeping scramble up from the forecastle. The gamblers pocket their dice. The musician's tune cuts off mid-note. You taste the salt spray on your lips as you stand on the deck, your heart pounding. You strain your eyes, scanning the horizon where the lookout is pointing. At first, you see nothing, and then you spot it, a distant, tiny speck of white on the endless blue line. A sail. The captain barks orders to the helmsman, his voice sharp and clear. The quartermaster rallies the men to their stations, ordering the cannons to be loaded. The ship heels over, its bowsprit swinging around, changing course to intercept. The chase is on, and the true, heart-pounding test of a pirate's life is about to begin. That single cry from the masthead changes everything. The lazy, monotonous rhythm of the open ocean is shattered. The ship, which had been a quiet, floating village, becomes a focused, living predator. The captain's voice cuts through the air, barking orders to the helmsman, his commands sharp and precise. The quartermaster is on his feet, his voice a low roar, shouting for all hands to battle stations. Men pour up from the cramped forecastle, rubbing sleep from their eyes, their movements quick and practiced. The energy is electric. The hunt is on. On the deck of your sloop, the air thrums with purposeful activity. You are gaining on the distant sail, and every man knows his role. The ship is fast, faster than the merchant vessel she is chasing, and the captain is a master of his craft. He is maneuvering for the weather gauge. This is the crucial tactical advantage of the sea, to be upwind of your target. It means the wind is at your back, filling your sails, while your prey must struggle against it. It gives you control. You decide when to engage. You decide when to pull away. The merchant ship, now realizing it is being pursued, is desperate, but your faster, more nimble sloop cuts off its every attempt to flee, herding it like a wolf herding a sheep. As the hours pass, the distant speck of white grows. It resolves into a two-masted merchant ship, a heavy, slow vessel, low in the water. A good sign. It means her hold is full. But the pirates do not yet show their true colors. This is a game of deception. From your mast, you fly a false flag. Perhaps it is the English red ensign or the yellow and red of Spain. The merchant ship, seeing a friendly flag, might relax for a crucial few moments. It might allow you to get closer than it otherwise would. You are now close enough to see the details of the other ship. You can see the figures on her deck, pointing, gesticulating. You see the panic begin to set in even before they know who you are. They can see your deck, and they can count. They can see 100 men, heavily armed, lining the rails of a ship that should only carry 30. This is the first and most powerful weapon in the pirate arsenal. Intimidation. The merchant captain, looking through his spyglass, is doing the grim mathematics. He has perhaps 20 men in his crew, and maybe 6 small cannons. He is facing a floating fortress of desperate, hardened fighters. The time for preparation is now. The quartermaster's voice is everywhere, assigning men to their stations. The gun crews are ordered to their cannons. Other men, the designated boarding parties, gather by the rails. You see a group of sailors scattering coarse, gritty sand across the smooth wooden planks of the deck. It is a chilling, practical preparation. They know that in a few minutes the deck will be slick with blood, and the sand is for traction. Other pirates are below, knocking down the thin wooden walls, the bulkheads that separate the cabins. This transforms the entire space below deck into one single, open gun deck. It allows the cannon crews to move faster, to share powder and shot, and to work with brutal efficiency. You check your own weapons. The heavy, curved cutlass is loose in its sheath. You feel the weight of the 2, or maybe 3, flintlock pistols stuffed into the sash around your waist. Every man is a walking arsenal. The sloop continues its approach, closing the distance. You are now within hailing distance, perhaps only a few hundred yards. The merchant ship is wallowing, its crew in visible chaos, trying to make a last, desperate turn. It is time. The captain gives the signal. The false flag, the friendly English ensign, is lowered. For a few heart-stopping seconds, there is a tense, naked silence, broken only by the wind, the creak of the rigging, and the slap of the waves. Then a new flag is hauled to the masthead. it unfurls, snapping in the wind, a black banner. On it, a white skull and crossed bones. The Jolly Roger. The sight of it is a psychological blow. It is a promise of violence. It is the end of all hope for the merchant crew. They know exactly who you are. Sometimes the flag was not black. Sometimes it was a solid, blood-red flag. This was a signal from the French Jolie Rouge, or Pretty Red. It had an even more terrifying meaning. It meant no quarter, no mercy would be given. Every man on board would be put to the sword, even if they surrendered. It was a threat of total annihilation, designed to cause instant, paralyzing terror. The merchant ship is now trapped. Its captain faces a desperate dilemma. Does he fight with his tiny crew and few cannons against an overcrewed and heavily armed pirate vessel? This would be suicide. Or does he surrender and hope that the pirates will honor their code and show mercy? The pirate captain gives one last chance. He orders a warning shot. A single cannon on the bow is fired. The ball does not hit the ship. It is aimed to skip across the water, just in front of the merchant's bow, sending up a high plume of white spray. It is a clear, final demand. Strike your colors. Surrender now. The merchant ship, in a final act of panicked defiance, makes a feeble attempt to flee. But your faster ship, holding the weather gauge, easily cuts off its escape. The time for deception is over. The time for warnings has passed. The captain gives the order. He shouts to the helmsman to pull alongside. He looks to his gun captains. The command is simple, and it is chilling. Fire the broadside. The helmsman spins the wheel. The sloop turns, exposing its entire side to the merchant vessel. The gun captains, who have been waiting for this moment, touch their burning linstocks to the priming holes of the cannons. The world ends in a single deafening explosion. The asterisk, boom, asterisk, of the broadside is not just a sound. It is a physical force, a punch of compressed air that you feel in your chest and your bones. The entire ship is violently shoved sideways in the water by the sheer recoil of its own cannons. Instantly, the bright Caribbean day is gone, replaced by a thick, hot, and choking cloud of acrid, sulphurous gunpowder smoke. It stings your eyes, burns your lungs, and makes it impossible to see more than a few feet in front of you. But this chaos is calculated. The pirate's goal is not to sink the merchant ship. A prize at the bottom of the ocean is worthless. The goal is to disable it and to demoralize its crew. This is why the cannons are loaded with specific types of shot. They are not just firing solid iron balls. Some are firing chain shot. This is a wicked invention. 2 smaller cannonballs, or heavy iron bars, linked together by a thick chain. As it leaves the cannon, it spins through the air like a deadly horizontal scythe. It is not aimed at the hull. It is aimed at the rigging. You hear the terrifying asterisk, crack asterisk, and asterisk crash asterisk of wood as the chain shot rips through the enemy's mainmast. You hear the high-pitched asterisk snap asterisk of ropes and the shredding of sails. The merchant ship is crippled, its speed and maneuverability gone. Other cannons, and the smaller swivel guns mounted on your own railing, are loaded with grape shot. This is a simple canvas bag, filled with dozens of small lead or iron balls. When fired, it turns the cannon into a giant shotgun, sweeping the enemy's deck and clearing it of any sailor foolish enough to be standing in the open. And then there is the sound from the other vessel. In the brief, ringing lulls between cannon shots, you can hear the screams of the wounded. Back on your own gun deck, the scene is one of coordinated, dangerous chaos. The gun captain shouts over the din, trying to get his crew to reload faster. Each cannon has a crew of 4 to 6 men, and they work in a frantic, perilous dance. The barrel is red hot from the firing. The first man in the wormer shoves a long tool down the barrel to clear out any smoldering scraps of the powder bag. He is followed by the sponger, who shoves a ramrod with a wet sheepskin head down the barrel. This is the most crucial step. It extinguishes any lingering embers. If he fails, if even one tiny spark remains, the cannon will explode when the new powder is loaded, killing the entire gun crew. Next, the loader shoves in the new cartridge of gunpowder, followed by the new shot. Another man rams it all home, packing it tight. The gun captain then pricks the new cartridge through a small touch hole and primes it with fine powder. He aims the heavy cannon, judging the roll of the ship, and then, with his long burning linstock, he fires again. The entire process takes only a minute or two, but it feels like an eternity in the choking smoke and the deafening noise. And the danger is not just from the enemy. In fact, the greatest danger is from your own ship. When an enemy cannonball, a round shot, hits the thick wooden hull of your ship, it does not make a clean, neat hole. The wood explodes. It sends a shower of high-velocity wooden splinters from the size of a toothpick to the size of a dagger flying across the deck. These splinters are the true killers of naval warfare. They tear through flesh and muscle far more effectively than a musket ball, causing horrific, gruesome wounds. Most of the casualties in a sea battle are not from cannonballs themselves, but from this secondary, splintering effect. While the cannons roar, other pirates are at work. Up in the rigging, high above the smoke, sharpshooters are clinging to the ropes. They are armed with long-range muskets. They are not firing wildly. They are taking careful, aimed shots. Their goal is to pick off key targets, the enemy helmsman, to send the ship veering out of control. The merchant captain, to sow panic, or any man trying to reload his own cannons. The broadside has done its job. The merchant ship's mainmast is a splintered wreck, its rigging hanging in useless tatters. Its decks are in disarray, the crew in a state of terror. The captain sees his moment. He orders the helmsman to pull alongside. The time for cannons is over. It is time to board. The helmsman skillfully brings the sloop in until the two ships are grinding against each other, side by side. The captain shouts the order, boarders away. This is the moment of pure, primal adrenaline. Men grab heavy iron grappling hooks tied to thick ropes. They hurl them across the gap. The heavy hooks make a solid thud, as they bite into the enemy's wooden rail. Instantly, dozens of pirates grab the ropes and begin to haul, lashing the two ships together until their railings touch. The boarding party, often led by the quartermaster or the first mate, surges forward. This is not a silent attack. It is a wave of terrifying sound. The men are screaming, yelling like madmen, a primal, calculated roar designed to terrify the merchant crew into immediate surrender. You are part of this wave. You take a breath, check the pistol in your hand, and swarm over the railing with the others. You land on the enemy deck. The chaos is immediate. The air is thick with the acrid, coppery smell of blood mixed with the lingering gunpowder smoke. You see a merchant sailor raise a weapon. You do not wait. You fire your flintlock pistol. The crack of the shot is deafening at this point-blank range, and a puff of white smoke temporarily blinds you. You drop the empty pistol. It is useless now. it is too slow to reload in a melee. You draw your cutlass. It is not a long, elegant, dueling rapier. It is a short, heavy, curved blade. It is designed for slashing, not stabbing, and it is perfect for the cramped, confined spaces of a ship's deck, where a longer sword would get tangled in the rigging. Around you, the fight is a blur of motion and sound. You hear the sharp, metallic asterisk, clang, asterisk, and asterisk, scrape, asterisk of cutlass against cutlass. You see another pirate using his boarding axe. This is both a tool and a weapon. He uses it to cut the ropes of the enemy's rigging, or to smash open a locked cabin door, or, as he is doing now, as a last-ditch, brutal weapon. Some pirates, at the start of the boarding, had lit the fuses on granados. These are simple, handheld bombs, hollow iron spheres filled with gunpowder. They are tossed onto the deck to clear a path, their explosion sending shrapnel in all directions. Others throw stink pots. These are simple clay pots filled with sulfur and other noxious chemicals, designed to break on impact and create a choking, blinding, sickening smoke. But the fight, for all its terror, is almost always over in mere minutes. The merchant crew is small, poorly paid, and has no loyalty to the ship's wealthy owners. They are not willing to die to protect a cargo of sugar or textiles. They are facing a overcrewed swarm of 100 screaming, heavily armed pirates who are fighting for their lives and their fortune. The merchant captain, seeing his crew overwhelmed with perhaps 2 or 3 men already down, knows the fight is hopeless. He throws down his sword and yells for quarter, the word for mercy. Instantly, the pirate attack stops. The quartermaster's voice bellows, "Hold!" They strike. Hold. This is the pirate code in action. If a ship surrendered, it was given quarter. The men would be spared. This was a crucial, practical rule. It encouraged other merchant ships to surrender quickly, saving pirate lives, pirate ammunition, and most importantly, not damaging the prize. If the ship had resisted fiercely, if it had caused many pirate deaths, the no-quarter rule would have been invoked. But not today. The surrender was quick. The prize is taken. The chaos of battle gives way to the organized, intense business of securing the plunder. The yelling stops. The primal roar of the boarding party fades. The sudden, relative quiet is unsettling, punctuated only by the groans of the wounded from both crews. The adrenaline begins to fade, replaced by a focused, business-like atmosphere. The first person to get to work is the pirate surgeon. He is, very often, a forced man himself, a doctor captured from a previous prize and given the choice to join the crew or be marooned. He sets up a grim, makeshift clinic on the deck of the captured ship. His tools are laid out. A fearsome-looking bone saw for amputations, which was the most common and effective treatment for a limb shattered by a cannonball or splinter. Scalpels for cutting, needles for stitching. His only real anesthetic is laudanum, a powerful tincture of opium and alcohol, which he gives to the wounded men from both sides. The air fills with the sharp, antiseptic smell of his tools, and often the scent of hot tar, which was sometimes used to quickly cauterize the stump of an amputated limb and stop the bleeding. While the surgeon works, the quartermaster begins his own grim task. The captured merchant crew is lined up on the deck. They are terrified, expecting death. But the quartermaster is not a simple butcher. He is an assessor of talent. He walks the line, questioning the men. He has no interest in keeping common, unskilled sailors, but he is looking for valuable artisans. "Are you a carpenter?" he asks one man, a cooper, a navigator, a surgeon's mate. These skilled men are given a choice. It is a tense moment. They can join the pirate crew, sign the articles, and receive a full share of all future plunder. Or they can refuse and be marooned on the next deserted island the pirates find. It is a brutal choice, but many, remembering the life they fled, chose to sign the articles and join their captors. At the same time, other pirates are breaking open the cargo hold with axes and crowbars. Their triumphant cheers echo up from below. They are not just looking for chests of gold and silver. Those pieces of 8 were the ultimate prize, but they were incredibly rare. What they are looking for are valuable, easily sold goods. They find barrels of rich, dark sugar from the West Indies, casks of expensive Madeira wine and brandy, crates of valuable indigo dye and exotic spices, and, most prized of all, bolts of fine textiles like Indian calico and Chinese silk, which were worth a fortune back in Europe. And just as valuable as the cargo are the ship's provisions. The pirates systematically stripped the ship of every cask of fresh water, every barrel of salt pork, every biscuit, and every spare bolt of sailcloth and coil of rope. These are the supplies that will allow them to keep sailing, to keep hunting. If there were any gentlemen passengers on board, they are brought on deck. They are stripped of their fine silk coats, their powdered wigs, and their silver-buckled shoes. The pirates, laughing, put on the ridiculous finery, mocking the high society that had cast them out. It is a powerful, symbolic reversal of the rigid class system they had escaped. Finally, a decision must be made about the prize ship itself. The crew gathers for a vote. If the captured merchant ship is larger, newer, or faster than their own sloop, they might vote to abandon their old vessel and make this their new flagship. Or, if they want to build a small fleet, they will put a prize crew of their own men, perhaps 20 pirates, onto the captured ship. They will then elect a new captain from amongst themselves to command this second vessel, which will sail alongside their own. If the ship is worthless, plundered of all its goods, and badly damaged, they might simply scuttle it, boring holes in its hull and letting it sink to the bottom. And what of the captured merchant crew, the ones who were not forced? They are not killed. They are often put into one of the ship's longboats, given some water, biscuits, and a small sail, and left to find their way to the nearest port. Or they are simply left on their plundered, crippled, but still floating ship, to be rescued later. The thrill of the hunt is over, and the prize is won. But this victory was not just about chaos, it was part of a complex system. It is fascinating how this life of supposed lawlessness had so many of its own rules, from the articles to the laws of engagement to the division of plunder. As we sail for port with our prize ship in tow, the entire social fabric of this floating democratic republic starts to come into focus. With the prize secured and its valuable cargo transferred, the crew sets a new course. The adrenaline of the fight fades, replaced by the warm anticipation of their reward. It is time to head for a place of safety and celebration, a pirate haven. The days that follow the battle are a gentle release. The adrenaline of the fight, the sharp, coppery smell of blood and powder, all of it fades, carried away by the warm, constant trade winds. Your sloop, accompanied by its new prize ship, has changed course. The mood on board is light, almost giddy. The hard, dangerous work is done. The reward is coming. You are no longer hunting. You are heading home, not to the cold, grimy ports of the old world, but to a place that is, for a short and brilliant moment in history, the capital of a new one. After several days of easy sailing, a cry comes from the masthead, "Land ho!" It is not a cry of alarm, but a cheer of recognition. On the horizon, a low, green smudge resolves into the familiar sight of New Providence Island in the Bahamas. You are sailing for Nassau, the infamous, beating heart of the golden age of piracy. This place, for a few brief, explosive years between roughly 1713 and 1718, was a true pirate republic. It was what sailors called a failed state. The English, weary from the long war, had largely abandoned the colony. Its official government had collapsed. Its fortifications were crumbling. It had become a place without masters, and the pirates had filled the vacuum. As your sloop approaches, you see the strategic genius of the harbor. A line of treacherous, shallow reefs protects the entrance. You see a large, three-masted Royal Navy frigate on patrol, forced to keep its distance, bobbing uselessly in the deep water miles offshore. It is too large, its draft too deep, to ever get inside. But your sloop, and the dozens of other ships like it, glides effortlessly through a secret, shallow channel. You enter a wide, protected bay, a perfect sanctuary. The sight that greets you is astonishing. The bright, turquoise water of the bay is crowded with masts, and from nearly every mast's head a Jolly Roger flies. Dozens of them, of all designs, snap in the breeze. Black flags with skulls, with skeletons, with hourglasses, and with bleeding hearts. It is a forest of rebellion. The town of Nassau is spread out along a crescent of brilliant white sand beach. It is a chaotic, vibrant, and utterly ramshackle place. There are almost no stone buildings. It is a sprawling collection of tents, driftwood shacks, and lean-tos made from old sails. Some of the largest structures are the repurposed hulls of captured ships, dragged onto the beach and turned into storehouses or crude taverns. This is the headquarters of the Flying Gang. This is the beach where legends walk. Men like Edward Blackbeard teach, a truly terrifying figure who commanded respect and fear, the calculating and ruthless Charles Vane. And this is where they would toast the memory of Black Sam Bellamy, the prince of pirates, who had been lost in a storm. The old stone fort that was built to protect the harbor is in ruins, its cannons toppled. The pirates, in a fit of practical irony, had taken control of it, pointing the remaining guns inland, to protect them from any land-based assault by a governor who might dare to return. Your sloop furls its sails and drops anchor. The heavy rattle of the chain is the signal. The voyage is over. The tension of the open sea, the constant readiness for a fight, dissolves from your shoulders. You are floating in a protected harbor, surrounded by hundreds of your brethren. You are safe. The air itself is different. It is thick, warm, and humid, and it carries a rich, complex mixture of smells. There is the sharp, familiar scent of the salt sea, but mixed with it is the smell of roasting pig from a dozen beachfront barbecues, the sweet, heavy aroma of spilled rum, and the perfume of tropical flowers growing wild at the edge of the jungle. And there is the sound. Even from the water, you can hear the life of the town. It is a constant, raucous hum of celebration. You hear the sound of fiddles and pipes playing fast, joyful jigs. You hear loud, booming laughter and shouting in a dozen different languages. This is a true crossroads of the world. The population is a multinational, multicultural mix of English privateers, Irish sailors, French buccaneers, Spanish deserters, and crucially, a large community of escaped slaves who had found in this lawless place the one thing the organized world would never grant them: true freedom and equality. The ship anchors in this bustling, chaotic harbor. The celebratory air of the haven is all around you. But the first order of business, before the true liberty can begin, is business. You have to turn that plunder into coin. The celebration must wait just for a moment. The first priority is the ship. She has been at sea for months. Her hull is covered in the speed-killing growth of the tropics. While the quartermaster goes ashore to begin his negotiations, you and the rest of the crew get to work. The sloop is brought into the shallow water of the beach at high tide. As the tide recedes, the ship settles onto the sand, listing to one side. This is the back-breaking work of careening. You spend the next 2 days in the hot sun, first scraping the barnacles and sea worms from the hull, then burning off the old fouled tar and applying a new, slick coat. It is exhausting work, but it is essential. Your life depends on your ship's speed. While this is happening, the quartermaster is at work. He is the crew's treasurer, their elected business agent. He is trusted by every man to get the best possible price for their hard-won prize. He rows ashore, not to the main beach, but to a quieter cove. Here, a different kind of ship is anchored. A sober, respectable-looking merchant vessel, flying the flag of Boston or New York. These are the fences, the shady, unscrupulous merchants, who are the other essential half of the pirate economy. Back home, they are pillars of their community, but here they are the black market. The quartermaster is led to a smoke-filled, torch-lit back room of a tavern, perhaps one run by a man like old Zach Flynn, who had grown rich by catering to the brethren of the coast. Inside, the merchant is waiting. He is a man who understands this world. There are no customs here, no import duties, no taxes, and no authorities to answer to. It is a free trader's paradise. The quartermaster lays out a sample of the goods. The merchant, with a practiced eye, inspects the cargo. He sniffs the expensive tobacco. He rubs the deep blue indigo dye between his fingers, judging its quality. He holds the bolt of Chinese silk up to the light. He knows the pirates have a problem. It is hard to sell bulk goods like sugar or flour in a place like Nassau. But high-value, low-volume goods like spices, dyes, textiles, and medicine are exactly what he is here for. The merchant makes a low offer. The pirates, he knows, are desperate for cash and supplies. But the quartermaster is a shrewd negotiator. He represents 100 armed men waiting just outside. The negotiation is tense, but it is built on a precarious, thieves' honor style of trust. This is a symbiotic relationship. The pirates provide the goods, stolen at great risk, for a fraction of their market value. The merchant provides the two things the pirates cannot live without: hard currency and supplies. Once a price is agreed upon for the plunder, a new negotiation begins. The quartermaster uses the new cash to buy gunpowder, lead shot, fresh sailcloth, medicine, and, of course, hundreds of barrels of rum. The merchant, who has just bought the plunder at a steep discount, now sells these essential supplies back to the pirates at a wildly inflated price. He wins on both ends of the deal. Finally, the transaction is complete. The merchant's men load the plunder onto their ship, which will sail for Boston or Charleston. where the goods will be quietly sold as salvage. The quartermaster returns to the crew, his longboat now loaded with supplies, and, most importantly, a very heavy canvas bag. The sound of that bag, the satisfying heavy clinking of thousands of silver coins, is the sound of success. With the cargo sold, the ship careened and restocked. The most anticipated moment of the entire voyage arrives. The quartermaster calls the entire crew together on the beach. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The raucous noise from the taverns seems to quiet down for a moment. The crew, clean from their work, sits in a large, quiet circle on the cooling sand. This is not a party. It is a democratic assembly. It is the climax of their voyage. The quartermaster walks into the center of the circle. He unrolls the ship's articles, the very same parchment you signed months ago. He reads the terms aloud, reminding every man of the contract that binds them. Transparency is absolute. He then takes the heavy canvas bag of silver coins and empties it onto a blanket in the center. The pile of silver and gold glints in the tropical twilight. It is a beautiful, tangible, and thrilling sight. But the division does not begin. First, the quartermaster calls out a name. It is the man who was struck by splinters during the boarding, the one who lost an eye. He comes forward. The quartermaster counts out 100 pieces of 8, exactly as the articles promised. This is his compensation, his insurance, his act of grace. He calls another name, a man who lost his right leg to the surgeon's saw. He is given 600 pieces of 8. This money is paid first. It is taken from the top of the pile before any shares are divided. It is a profound statement of their community. In the Royal Navy, these men would be cast off, left to beg. Here, they are honored. They are paid before even the captain. Only when the wounded have been compensated does the true division begin. The quartermaster counts the remaining pile and divides it into the exact number of shares specified by the articles. He calls the captain's name. The captain comes forward and receives his 2 shares. The quartermaster himself takes 2 shares. This is their payment for the immense responsibility of command and negotiation. He calls the master carpenter, the surgeon, and the master gunner. These skilled, essential men each receive 1.5 or 1.25 shares. And then he begins to call the names of the crew. One by one, you hear your name, you walk forward. You stand before the quartermaster and the pile of silver. He counts out your portion, 1 full, single share, exactly the same as the man next to you, regardless of his age, his nationality, or his color. He drops the heavy, cool silver coins into your cupped hands. This is the reward for your risk. This is the fruit of your labor. This is your freedom in physical form. You walk back to the circle and sit down, the weight of the silver in your pocket. You watch as every other man is called. There are no protests. There are no arguments. There are no backroom deals. The system is perfectly fair, and it is accepted by all. This, more than any other single thing, is what created the intense loyalty of a pirate crew. It was not a wage handed down by a rich owner. It was a share system. If the voyage had failed, everyone would have received nothing. But it had succeeded. And now, every man who had shared the risk was sharing the reward in a way that was almost perfectly equal. It was a radical, revolutionary idea. On a privateer ship, the owners and officers back in London would have taken more than half the plunder. On a naval vessel, the captain and admiralty would have taken the vast majority. Here, on this beach, The men who did the fighting took it all. With your pockets full of silver, the hard work is done. The articles are rolled up. The serious business of the Republic is concluded. The lights and sounds of Nassau's taverns beckon. The celebration and the liberty on shore begins. You walk from the quiet, democratic assembly on the beach into the warm, torchlit chaos of the town. This is the boom and bust cycle of the pirates' life. They were notorious for spending their money as fast as they earned it. It was a true live-for-today mentality, born from the simple statistical fact that their lives were likely to be short. An entire service economy had sprung up to cater to this. Taverns, gambling dens, and merchants were everywhere, all designed to separate a pirate from his silver. You step into a crowded, smoke-filled tavern. The raucous, joyful sound of a fiddle playing a fast jig fills the air. A group of men at a heavy wooden table lets out a loud cheer, followed by a groan. They are gambling, slamming a dice cup on the wood, their newly won silver already in play. You buy a drink. The drink of choice is rum, or, more likely, bumbo. This was a popular pirate concoction, a mix of rum, water, sugar, and spices, like nutmeg. It is sweet, spicy, and incredibly strong. You see pirates, men who had been in rags only days before, now dressed in flamboyant, stolen finery. They are wearing silk vests, plumed hats, and heavy gold chains. It is a performance of their success, a mockery of the aristocracy they despised. This is the origin of the Calico Jack Rackham legend. It was said he earned his nickname by spending his entire massive share on a shipment of brightly colored Indian calico, outfitting himself and his crew in the most garish, expensive clothes he could find. They were spending, as one observer wrote, like lords. The celebrations were communal. A pirate who had just been paid would often buy a round of drinks for the entire tavern, treating his crewmates and the entire town. And this, by the way, is why the stereotype of pirates burying their treasure is almost entirely fiction. It is a wonderful, romantic story, but it makes no sense. Why would a man with a life expectancy of 2 or 3 years bury his money? His money was for spending. It was for now. It was for buying supplies, for buying pleasure, for buying the brief, glorious feeling of being a king, if only for a night. His bank was the tavern. His savings account was the dice game. The famous exception that proves the rule was Captain Kidd. He did bury treasure, but not for storage. He buried it as a desperate political move, a cache to be used as a bargaining chip when he was trying to negotiate a pardon. The idea of a map with an X marking the spot was a fantasy. The reality was a celebration, right here, right now. This wild, glorious liberty on shore could last for days or even weeks. It was a whirlwind of music, drink, and fleeting riches. And then, just as suddenly, it would end. One morning, you wake up. Your head is pounding. Your pockets are empty. The silver is gone. The entire town, in a collective, hungover state, is broke. The service economy has, with great efficiency, absorbed every last piece of 8. The crew is sober. The money is gone, and the men are ready to go back to work. The quartermaster begins his walk along the beach again, unrolling a new set of articles. The ship, clean, fast, and fully restocked, is floating in the harbor. The cycle of the pirate's life is complete. Hard work, high risk, a huge reward, and a brief, glorious celebration. And so, our main journey comes to a close. We have felt the thrill of the hunt, the chaos of battle, and the unique democratic joy of dividing the spoils. We have seen how these outcasts built their own republic, a fleeting, sun-drenched dream of freedom and equality, if only for a short while. It is a story of rebellion that still captures our imagination. I hope this adventure has been a relaxing one for you. As we let the sounds of the pirate haven fade into a gentle hum, I would love to know, what part of their code did you find the most surprising? Sweet dreams, and thank you for joining me. The celebration in Nassau lasts for days, a whirlwind of music, drink, and fleeting riches. But this raucous life on shore, this explosive release of tension and newfound wealth, was only one small part of the pirates' existence. The true story of their lives was also written in the long, quiet, and profound days at sea. Now, as our ship is once again clean, repaired, and resupplied, we set sail. The anchor is weighed, and the chaotic haven of Nassau fades into the turquoise horizon. The ship settles into the familiar, gentle rhythm of the open ocean. The pace of life slows. The adrenaline of the hunt is a distant memory. The raucous joy of the celebration has faded. What is left is the daily existence of this floating republic. It is a life of routine, of shared culture, and of a unique society, bound only by the articles and the vast surrounding sea. This is where we discover the true human texture of the pirate world. Let us first dispel the myth that a pirate's life was lived entirely on stale biscuits and rum. That was the grim reality of the Royal Navy, a life of endless, gray monotony. The pirate, by contrast, was a connoisseur of stolen luxury and a pragmatic master of survival. Their menu was often as diverse as their crew. The baseline, of course, was the same as any long-haul voyage. There were barrels of salt pork and salt beef, meat so tough and brined it was more like wood than food. And there was the hardtack biscuit, the weevil's castle, a cracker so dense you had to tap it on the table to shake out the insects. This was the food of last resort. But a pirate ship was a ship of plunder, and that plunder included food. One of the most obvious signs of a pirate's superior diet was the sound of the deck itself. In the pens, you would hear the clucking of chickens, the bleating of goats, and the snorting of pigs. These were live plunder, liberated from the holds of merchant ships. While the Royal Navy sailor dreamed of fresh meat, the pirate had it wandering the deck, a living, breathing larder that provided fresh eggs every morning and a roasted feast whenever the crew voted for it. But the pirates were also expert hunters and foragers. Their favored hunting ground was the sea itself, and their most prized prey was the giant sea turtle. Crews would land on deserted beaches known to be nesting grounds. They would wait, and then, in a great, coordinated effort, they would heave the massive creatures, some weighing hundreds of pounds, onto their backs. This was known as flipping the turtle. The turtles, unable to right themselves, would be ferried back to the ship. They were laid gently on their backs in the shade of the sails, and in this harmless, upside-down state, they could be kept alive for weeks, sometimes months. When the crew craved fresh meat, one would be butchered. The taste of fresh, roasted turtle, a rich meat that was said to combine the flavors of beef, chicken, and veal, was a profound luxury. It was a welcome, savory relief from the endless salt. When the ship was becalmed, or the hunting was thin, fishing lines would be dropped from the side of the vessel. It was a constant, patient pastime, a way to pass the long, quiet hours, and a way to add fresh, flaky fish to the evening meal. When they stopped on islands to refill their water casks, foraging parties would venture into the jungle. They knew, far better than the naval admiralty, the dangers of scurvy. They had learned from experience, or from the wisdom of indigenous tribes, the life-saving power of fresh fruit. They would return to the beach laden with coconuts, ripe bananas, mangoes, and most precious of all, wild citrus, which they would suck on, the sharp, sour juice, a blessing against the sickness of the deep. This varied, fresh, and plundered bounty all came together in the hands of one of the ship's most important members, the cook. The position of ship's cook was not a lowly one. In fact, it was often a role of honor, a kind of working retirement given to a respected veteran of the crew. Perhaps, like the fictional Long John Silver, he was a man who had lost a leg in a previous battle. He could no longer climb the rigging or lead a boarding party, but his loyalty and his skill were valued. The crew provided for him, giving him this easy job, a perfect example of their communal social safety net. And this cook, with all these ingredients, would create the pirates' most famous dish. It was called salmagundi. Imagine a massive communal cauldron simmering over a fire built in a sand-filled box on the deck. The delicious, complex smell of it would drift across the entire ship, a promise of a true feast. Into this pot went everything, all the chopped, roasted, and boiled meats on hand, whether it was turtle, fish, chicken, or cured pork, hard-boiled eggs from their stolen hens, chopped pickled vegetables like onions and cabbage, olives, anchovies, and grapes, liberated from a merchant's cask. It was all mixed together with vinegar, oil, and heavy spices, creating a massive, rich, and savory salad, a stew, a communal feast that was as chaotic and diverse as the crew itself. It was the taste of their success. Even their drinking was different. Of course, there was rum, but on a pirate ship, rum was not just for pleasure. It was a practical necessity. The ship's water was stored in wooden casks. After weeks in the tropical heat, it would grow stagnant. When a ladle was dipped in, the water would be thick and green with algae, and it tasted foul. And so, it was purified by mixing it with rum. The alcohol killed some of the bacteria and, more importantly, it masked the awful taste. But pirates rarely drank the Royal Navy's grog, which was just rum and plain water. That was a drink of discipline, designed to stretch supplies. Pirates preferred a drink of luxury, a concoction they called bumbo. They would mix their rum and water with sugar and, most importantly, nutmeg, a valuable, plundered spice. The sweet, spicy, and powerful taste of bumbo was another small daily comfort, a reminder that they were free men, not servants. And then there were the true celebrations. When a prize ship was taken that was heavy with casks of French brandy, Spanish wine, or rich Madeira, it was a cause for joy. These were not just drinks. They were a taste of the high society that had rejected them. Food, you see, was a high priority. It was a matter of morale. A pirate captain who failed to secure good provisions, who let his crew go hungry or subsist on weevils and pork, would not be captain for long. He would be voted out, replaced by a man who understood that a free man deserved to eat well. This sustenance was a practical matter, but the soul of the crew, its spirit, was often fed by something else entirely. It was fed by the music and the stories that filled the long, quiet hours of the watch. The life of a sailor was a life of intense, coordinated labor, and that labor had a soundtrack. We often call all sea songs shanties, but this is not quite right. A shanty, a word that likely comes from the French chanter, meaning to sing, was never ever sung for leisure. It was a work song. It was a tool. Imagine the crew, struggling to haul up the massive, dripping anchor. It is a back-breaking, monotonous task. A single man, the shantyman, would stand and sing a line, "Heave away, my bonny boys," and the entire crew, pulling in unison on the capstan bar, would grunt and sing the response, "Way, haul, away." This call and response format was the key. It was a rhythmic pulse that coordinated the muscle of dozens of men into one single, powerful machine. They had shanties for hauling rigging, shanties for pumping the bilge, and shanties for raising the anchor. They were grunting, rhythmic, and purely functional. But when the sun set, when the work was done, and the night watch was set, a different kind of music would fill the air. These were the forebidders, or the folksly songs. They were sung for leisure, for entertainment, for the soul. Men would gather on the forecastle, the folksly, in the cool of the evening, and in the relative quiet, one of the ship's musicians would begin to play. Musicians, a good fiddler or a piper, were incredibly valued members of the crew. They were social treasures. They were often paid an extra share, or a share and a quarter, just for their skill. It was a mournful, sweet sound, the melody of a lone fiddler drifting over the quiet, dark water at sunset. The crew would join in, their voices soft, singing not of work, but of life. They sang of grand adventures and tragic sea battles. They sang of lost loves and the homes they would never see again. They sang of their own legends, of the captains they had followed and the prizes they had won. Some pirate captains, far from being the brutes of legend, were great patrons of this art. The famous pirate Bartholomew Roberts, a man of strange and strict discipline, insisted that his ship's orchestra play on the deck every Sunday. It was a day of rest, of music, and, bizarrely, of prayer, even as they were the most wanted outlaws on the sea. This art was essential because many of the pirates were illiterate. They could not read books. Their literature was oral. Storytelling was one of the primary forms of entertainment. On a calm night, with the ship moving gently, a single lantern would light the faces of the men gathered in a circle. One man, a gifted storyteller, would spin a tall tale, a story of a kraken that pulled a ship to the depths, or a tale of a mythical island. They would share legends, myths, and ghost stories, their laughter or their hushed silence drifting into the night. Of course, not all entertainment was so refined. Gambling was a constant pastime. You would hear the loud slam of a dice cup on a wooden table, followed by a cheer or a groan. Men would play cards or roll dice, betting the silver they had not yet earned. But even this was regulated by their pragmatic democracy. Many pirate articles, including those of Bartholomew Roberts, strictly forbade gambling for high stakes. A man was free to gamble for small coin, but the articles prevented him from losing his entire share in a single night. This was not a moral rule. It was a practical one, designed to prevent the anger, the accusations of cheating, and the violent fights that could tear a crew apart. And there was dancing. On a long voyage, with the men confined to the small space of the ship, they had to stay fit. The musicians would strike up a fast jig or a hornpipe, and the men would take turns dancing on the deck, their heavy, bare feet stomping in rhythm. It was a joyful release of energy, a way to stay sane and healthy in their wooden, floating world. This complex culture of music, stories, and dance was the social glue that held the ship together. This was a crew of men from all over the world, but in these moments they were not English or French or African or Swedish. They were one crew, one brotherhood, singing one song. This camaraderie was the glue, but it was often tested by the ever-present, terrifying dangers of the ocean. This was a world of immense, uncontrollable power. A single rogue wave, a sudden, violent storm, or an uncharted reef could send them all to their deaths in an instant. In the face of this constant, overwhelming danger, the sailors, like all sailors of their time, developed a deep and profound belief in superstition. It was a way to feel some small, ritualistic sense of control over their fate. The ship was a world governed by unwritten magical rules. Perhaps the most serious rule, one that was enforced with angry glares and sudden tense silence, was the rule against whistling. A sailor did not whistle. To whistle a tune on the deck was to whistle up a wind, to summon a storm. It was seen as a direct, arrogant challenge to the forces of nature, and it was strictly forbidden. Certain things were considered terrible luck. Bananas, for example, were never allowed on a pirate ship. The origin of this is murky, but the belief was strong. Some historians think it was because ships carrying bananas from the West Indies had to move very fast to sell their cargo before it rotted. This meant the crews had no time for fishing, and so the voyages were unlucky, meaning they were hungry. Others believed the crates carried hidden, venomous spiders. Whatever the reason, bananas were a powerful omen of doom. The ultimate bad omen, the central ghost story of the sea, was the sight of the Flying Dutchman on a dark, stormy night with the wind howling. A lookout might claim to see it, a spectral, ghostly ship, its sails in tatters, its crew long dead, doomed to sail the oceans forever, never making port. To see the Dutchman was a sign that your own ship was marked for death. The ocean itself was a place of dark mythology. The final resting place of any man who drowned was not simply the bottom of the sea. It was Davy Jones' locker. Davy Jones was the sailor's devil, the malevolent spirit of the deep, and his locker was the cold, dark, watery grave that awaited them all. To counter these fears, sailors relied on charms and protective talismans. One of the most sought-after charms was a caul, a small, rare piece of membrane that had covered a baby's head at birth. It was believed that a man who carried a caul in his pocket could not drown. They wore their charms on their skin. Sailor tattoos were not just decoration, they were powerful talismans. An anchor was a symbol of stability. A cross was a plea for divine protection. Most famously, a sailor might have a tattoo of a pig on one foot and a rooster on the other. This was because these animals were kept in wooden crates that would often float in a shipwreck and were thus seen as symbols of finding land. And, of course, they had rituals. They would never set sail on a Friday, as it was considered a deeply unlucky day, the day of Christ's crucifixion. A sailor would always step onto a ship with his right foot first. To step on board with the left foot was to bring bad luck to the entire voyage. They also learned to read the sky, mixing practical observation with superstition. Red sky at morning, sailor, take warning. This was a sign of an approaching storm. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. This meant clear weather ahead. And then there were the omens from the natural world. Seabirds, like the albatross, were seen as sacred. They were thought to carry the souls of dead sailors, and to kill one was a terrible crime that would bring a curse upon the entire ship. On a stormy night, a strange green-blue light might appear in the rigging. It was a form of static discharge, which we now call St. Elmo's fire. But to a sailor, it was a powerful, supernatural omen. These beliefs were not the sign of a foolish or uneducated mind. They were a necessary psychological comfort, a shared set of rules that provided a small comfort against the vast, chaotic, and uncontrollable power of the ocean. But just as powerful as these supernatural beliefs, and far more revolutionary, was the human element. The complex, unique, and surprisingly progressive society they had built together in their floating republic. We call them the Brethren of the Coast, an old term from the 17th century buccaneers. But that spirit of a brotherhood was never more true than in the Golden Age. A pirate ship was, perhaps, the most multicultural, multinational, and progressive place on Earth in the early 18th century. Gathered in the forecastle for a meal of salmagundi, you would hear a dozen accents. The crew was a mix of men from every maritime nation. There were English, Irish, and Scottish sailors fleeing the press gangs. There were French and Dutch privateers left over from the last war. There were Swedes, Portuguese, and men from the new American colonies. But most astonishingly, and most importantly, was the presence of men of African descent. Historians estimate that on many pirate ships in the Golden Age, the crew was between 25 and 50% black. These were men who had escaped the brutal, unimaginable cruelty of the sugar plantations in the West Indies, or free men who had been sailors in port towns. And here, on the deck of a pirate ship, they were treated as equals. In the civilized world, in the empires of Britain, France, and Spain, these men were property. They were subhuman, bought and sold like cargo. Their lives were dictated by the whip. On a pirate ship, a man of African descent received one full share of the plunder. He had one full vote in the ship's affairs. He was a free man, a brother, equal in every way to the white sailor next to him. This was a concept so radical, so unthinkable in the outside world, that it is hard to overstate its importance. This utopia was like so many other things about pirates, born of pragmatism. They were all outlaws together. A man's past, his origins, his religion, or the color of his skin meant nothing. The only law that mattered was the pirate code, the articles they had all signed. What mattered was a man's skill. Could he handle the rigging in a storm? Was he a good gunner? What mattered was his courage. Would he stand and fight in a boarding action? And what mattered was his loyalty, not to a king or a country, but to the crew. This created a bond that was often stronger than nationality. A partel, or a sea brother, was a trusted shipmate, a man you relied on for your very life. We see this in the historical record. Famous pirates of color, like Black Caesar, who sailed as a trusted lieutenant with Blackbeard himself, rose to positions of command. This floating republic was a direct, radical, and profound rejection of the slavery and the rigid class and racial hierarchies of the empires they fought against. Their loyalty was to each other, to the ship, and to the articles that guaranteed their freedom. This unique, pragmatic, and surprisingly progressive society was a direct rebellion against the world they had left behind. It was a world built on rejection, but also on a new, shared ideal. This floating republic, bound by its own rules and a shared rejection of the world's empires, was a marvel of its time, a place where, for a fleeting moment, a man was judged not by his birth or his color, but by his courage and his loyalty to the crew. It is a profound thought to rest on, this radical, dangerous equality found in the heart of the lawless Caribbean. I hope you are feeling relaxed. We will explore just a bit more of their world after this quiet pause. This floating republic, this unique, pragmatic, and surprisingly progressive society was a marvel of its time. It was a direct, dangerous, and defiant rebellion against the world's empires, a world built on rigid hierarchy and brutal inequality. For a fleeting moment, on the sun-drenched, turquoise seas of the Caribbean, a new society was born. It was a place where a man was judged not by his birth or his color, but by his courage, his skill, and his loyalty to the crew. It is a profound and peaceful thought to rest on. This radical, dangerous equality found in the heart of the lawless Caribbean. I hope you are feeling relaxed. We will explore just a bit more of their world after this quiet pause. But this dream, this sun-drenched republic of outcasts, could not last. It was too bright, too defiant. The civilized world, the world of kings and empires and vast merchant companies, had been shaken. The pirates were not just a nuisance. They were a threat to the entire economic order. They were a revolutionary idea, and that idea had to be extinguished. And so, the empires struck back. Our story, which began in the chaos of Nassau, now returns to that very same harbor. The party, as we have seen, was a wild, glorious, and fleeting thing. The silver, once piled high on the beach, was now spent. The barrels of brandy were empty. And in the quiet, hungover stillness of the morning, a new tension had settled over the ramshackle town. Rumors had been swirling for months. Rumors of a new governor. Rumors of a fleet sailing from England with a mandate to end the pirate republic for good. Then, one clear morning in July of 1718, the lookout in the crumbling fort spotted the sails. This was not a merchant ship ripe for the plundering. This was not a familiar pirate sloop returning with a prize. On the horizon, a squadron of Royal Navy frigates appeared, their sails white and full. They moved with a terrifying, organized precision. They were clean, powerful, and they flew the flag of the king. This was the sight of true, uncompromising authority. The fleet sailed past the outer reefs, the ones that had always protected the pirates, and anchored just outside, blockading the harbor. The sanctuary, the pirates' safe haven, had just become a trap. The man who commanded this fleet was, perhaps, the only man who could have succeeded. His name was Woodes Rogers. He was not some pampered nobleman from London. He was a famed and deeply respected ex-privateer. He was, in effect, a legal pirate, a man who had sailed the world and commanded his own rough crews. He understood the pirate mindset. He knew their strengths, and he knew their weaknesses. He had been hired by the English, who were desperate to reclaim the Bahamas, and he arrived carrying two things: cannons and a very smart, very powerful idea. His most powerful weapon was not a broadside, it was a simple piece of paper. It was the Act of Grace, the king's pardon. Rogers sent a boat ashore, carrying this proclamation. It was read aloud to the hundreds of pirates who had gathered nervously on the beach. The offer was simple, and it was a masterstroke of strategy. Any pirate, regardless of his crimes, who surrendered to Governor Rogers by a specific date, would receive a full and complete amnesty. His name would be cleared. He would be a free, legal subject of the king once more, with no fear of the gallows. This single act did what no naval blockade could have done. It broke the brotherhood. It split the herd. Suddenly, the entire town was plunged into a heated, nervous debate. You can almost hear the arguments in the taverns and on the beaches. On one side were the pragmatists, men like Benjamin Hornigold, one of the original and most respected captains of the Republic. He argued that the game was up. They had a good run. The navies of the world were no longer at war with each other, which meant they were all, finally, united against the pirates. Their safe haven was gone. To fight was suicide. The pardon, he argued, was a golden bridge, a way to keep their lives, to keep their wealth, and to return to a normal existence. On the other side were the hardliners, the true believers, men like the infamous Charles Vane. Vane was a man of pure, uncut defiance. He spat at the idea of a pardon. To him, accepting the pardon was not a return to freedom. It was a return to slavery. It was a return to the world of the wage, the lash, and the press gang. He had sworn to live a free man, and he would die a free man. Woodes Rogers' strategy worked perfectly. The pragmatic pirates, who were, after all, businessmen, saw the logic. One by one, then in dozens, they rowed out to the governor's ships and signed their names to the pardon. Benjamin Hornigold, in a final symbolic act, not only accepted the pardon but turned his coat. He became an official pirate hunter using his skill and knowledge to hunt down his former brethren for his new master, the king. This was the end of the Pirate Republic of Nassau. The hardliners were now a tiny, hunted minority. The brotherhood was broken, its trust shattered. Charles Vane, seeing his world collapse, refused to surrender. In a final, spectacular act of defiance, he waited until the dark of night. He set his own prize ship on fire, turning it into a fire ship, and sent it sailing directly into Rogers' naval fleet, hoping to cause panic and chaos. And then, as the English ships scrambled to avoid the flames, Vane's small sloop, his cannons firing defiantly at the governor's ships in the night, slipped through a small, unguarded channel and escaped into the open sea. It was a blaze of glory, but it was not a victory. It was a retreat. The party was over. Woodes Rogers sailed into the harbor, his authority absolute. He rebuilt the fort, established a government, and began the work of restoring civilized life. His new motto for the colony was proudly displayed: Expulsus, Piratus, Restituta, Commercia. Pirates expelled, commerce restored. The Golden Age, that brief, intense period of pirate power from roughly 1713 to 1725, was effectively broken. The safe haven was gone. The hunters, with their former brothers now guiding them, were relentless. For those who had taken the pardon, a new, quiet life began. But for those who refused, like Charles Vane, or for those who were captured later, like the gentleman pirate Stede Bonnet, a very different and very public fate awaited. For the pirates who refused the pardon, the world became a much smaller, much more dangerous place. The safe haven of Nassau was gone. Royal Navy patrols, now guided by former pirates, were everywhere. The hunters had become the hunted. When a pirate ship was finally cornered, captured after a desperate, losing fight, the crew was not treated as prisoners of war. They were put in chains. They were brought to the nearest colonial port, like Charleston in the Carolinas, or Port Royal in Jamaica, or even Boston. And there they faced a new, swift, and terrible form of justice, the Admiralty Court. In the old days, a pirate had to be shipped all the way to London for a trial. This was expensive and time-consuming. To solve this, the empires set up these special courts in the colonies, with one purpose: to try pirates, and to try them quickly. When a pirate was brought before this court, he found that he had almost no legal protections. He was charged under a chilling, ancient legal concept. He was hostis humani generis, an enemy of all mankind. This meant he was not a citizen of any nation. He was, in the eyes of the law, a wolf, a pest, a plague, upon the world, and any civilized man had the right, and indeed the duty, to exterminate him. The trials were almost always show trials. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. The local merchants and governors needed to make a statement to prove that their port was clean and that commerce was safe. We can see this in the famous tragic trial of Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate, the wealthy plantation owner who had abandoned his life for reasons no one could understand, was captured and brought to trial in Charleston in 1718. He, who had been a man of high society, was now a chained enemy of all mankind. He was found guilty, and his fate was sealed. When the death sentence was read, a grim and public ritual began. The execution of a pirate was a spectacle, a piece of political theater designed to strike terror into the hearts of any other sailor who might be dreaming of the black flag. The executions were held at public execution docks, places like Wapping in London, or at the sandy, windswept entrance to a city's harbor. And they were held at a specific time, low tide. This was deeply symbolic. The gallows, a simple wooden frame, was built upon the dark, wet mudflats in the liminal space between the land and the sea. The pirate, who had belonged to neither world, was to be executed in this place of in-between. On the day of the execution, the condemned man was paraded through the streets, often to the sound of a single muffled drum. A massive crowd would gather. It was a public holiday, a dark festival. The pirate was brought to the gallows. The black-clad executioner would place the rope around his neck. And this is where the true, grim reality of the punishment becomes clear. In this era, they used the short drop method of hanging. This was not the modern, humane long drop, which is designed to break the neck instantly. This was a short rope and a short fall. The condemned was simply pushed from a cart, or the ladder was pulled away. The fall was not enough to break the neck. It led to a slow, agonizing, and public strangulation. The crowd would watch in hushed, morbid anticipation as the man struggled for long, terrible minutes. This was known, in grim sailors' slang, as the dance of the gallows. But even this was not the end. For a simple, common pirate, death was the end. But for a famous captain, a leader, his body was reserved for one final, terrible warning. The body was taken down, and it was gibbeting. This was a horrific process. The corpse was coated in thick, black, boiling tar, a substance every sailor knew well. It was then fitted into a custom-made iron cage, built to the shape of his body, with hoops around the arms, legs, and head. This cage, this gibbet, containing the tarred body of the captain, was then hung from a massive wooden pole right at the very entrance to the harbor, and it was left there for months, sometimes for years. Every single ship that sailed into or out of that port, every single sailor would have to pass this gruesome, blackened, tarred figure, swinging gently in the sea breeze as the gulls picked it apart. The smell of the tar would drift on the sea air, a constant, grim reminder. This is what happens to enemies of mankind. This is what happens to captains who raise the black flag. This is the Empire's final, brutal, and unblinking statement. The famous execution of William Kidd in London was famously and gruesomely botched. When he was dropped, the rope broke. He fell to the mud, stunned but alive. He had to be dragged back up the ladder in the pouring rain and hanged a second time. His body was then gibbeted over the Thames, where it remained for over 20 years. The empires tried, with all their might, to erase the pirate, to turn him into a grotesque warning. But a strange thing happened. The more brutal the execution, the more defiant the pirate's last words, the more the public's imagination was captured. The very pamphlets that were printed to describe the executions, meant to be terrifying, became true crime bestsellers. The public execution, meant to inspire terror, instead created legends. And the pirate didn't just disappear. He transformed into something far more powerful. This brutal public end was designed to erase the pirate from the world, to make him a symbol of terror and decay. And yet it failed. The image of the pirate, their story, only grew. But it grew in a very strange and very fictional direction. When we think of a pirate today, what do we see? We see a man with a wooden leg. We see a brightly colored parrot on his shoulder. We see him with a treasure map, where X marks the spot, on his way to bury a heavy chest of gold coins and jewels on a deserted island. This image is powerful, it is romantic, and it is almost entirely, wonderfully, a myth. Let us start with the treasure itself. As we have seen, pirates did not bury their money, they spent it. Theirs was a live-for-today philosophy, born of a short and dangerous life. A buried treasure chest is of no use to a man who is being gibbeted at the harbor entrance. There is one, and only one, major documented exception to this rule. That is the case of Captain William Kidd. Kidd, as we saw, was a complex figure, a privateer accused of piracy, trying to clear his name. He did bury a significant cache of treasure on Gardiner's Island, off New York. But this was not a retirement fund. It was a desperate political gamble. He believed he could use this treasure as a bargaining chip, proof of his wealth and power, to negotiate a pardon. It was a terrible miscalculation. The treasure was found, dug up, and shipped to London, where it was used as the primary evidence against him at his trial, sealing his fate on the gallows. So, if it was not real, where did this idea come from? It was born, almost entirely, in the mind of a single writer, more than 150 years after the Golden Age had ended. In 1883, the Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson published his novel, Treasure Island. This book, written for boys, is the single most important source for the pirate myth. This is where the treasure map with the X becomes the central plot point. This is the origin of the mutinous crew led by the one-legged man, the unforgettable Long John Silver. And it is Silver who has the parrot, named Captain Flint, squawking pieces of 8 on his shoulder. These images, the leg, the parrot, the map, are all literary inventions. They are so brilliant, so captivating, that they have completely replaced the historical reality in our collective imagination. The same is true for the idea of walking the plank. It is a wonderful, dramatic, and terrifying image, but there is almost no historical evidence that it was ever a common practice. Pirates, as we have seen, were pragmatic. If they wanted to punish or kill a captive, they were far more direct. They would maroon them, as their articles prescribed, or simply use a cutlass or a pistol. It was faster and far less complicated. But there was another book, one that came much earlier, that set the stage for Stevenson. In 1724, at the very end of the Golden Age, a mysterious book was published in London called A General History of the Pirates. It was written by a Captain Charles Johnson. We do not know who this was. It was a pseudonym. Many historians today believe it was, in fact, Daniel Defoe, the famous author of Robinson Crusoe. This book was the true crime bestseller of its day. It was a thrilling, sensationalist account of the lives of the most famous pirates. The author mixed real facts taken from trial records and newspaper reports with heavy asterisk embellishment. This book is where the asterisk characters asterisk of the Golden Age were truly born. This is where Edward Blackbeard Teach is first described as a terrifying demon who fought with smoking fuses braided into his massive black beard to wreathe his head in a cloud of smoke. This is where Calico Jack Rackham, a fairly minor pirate, is turned into a major character, mostly because he sailed with two of the most sensational figures of all, the female pirates, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. These two books, A General History and Treasure Island, created the romantic, adventurous, and fictional pirate of our imagination. We can almost feel the old, leather-bound copy of Treasure Island in our hands, or hear the crackle of a warm fireplace as we read these old, embellished tales. This mythology is powerful, it is entertaining, and it has endured for centuries. But it often overshadows the true, and perhaps far more fascinating, legacy of the Golden Age pirate. This mythology, born in books and cemented in our collective imagination, is a powerful story. But the true legacy of the pirate is not buried in sand. It is not a chest of gold or a map. The pirates' true legacy, the treasure they left behind, was their system. It was their radical, revolutionary ideas of democracy, equality, and rebellion written on those salt-stained articles. Let us think one last time about that floating republic. The one-man, one-vote system was not a small thing. It was revolutionary. In the early 18th century, the world was governed by absolute monarchs and rigid aristocracies. A common man had no power, no voice. On a pirate ship, his voice was equal to any other. He could, with his vote, help hire the captain, and he could fire him. This was a proto-democratic document, a forerunner to the very constitutions that would soon be written in America and France. The meritocracy of the ship was just as radical. A man was not a captain because his father was a nobleman or because he had bought his commission. He was elected captain because he was the best sailor, the smartest navigator, or the bravest fighter. He was chosen for his skill, not his birth. This was a true, functioning meritocracy, a direct rejection of the class system that defined their world. And then there was the social safety net, that quiet, profound clause in the articles that guaranteed compensation for injury. A man who lost a leg or an eye was not discarded. He was paid from the top, before anyone else. This was a concept of communal care, of a worker's compensation that was hundreds of years ahead of its time. It showed that they valued the person, their contribution, and their sacrifice. Historians, like Marcus Rediker, have argued that these men were not just common thieves. They were social bandits. They were early proto-democratic rebels who were fighting back against the rise of a new, and in their eyes, brutal form of merchant capitalism. They were rejecting the horrific wage labor system of the merchant ships. They were rejecting the tyranny of the Royal Navy's press gangs and the bloody lash. They were rejecting a world built on slavery and serfdom. And in that rejection, they created a new world, their multiracial social experiment, where men of African and European descent lived, voted, and fought side by side as equals, was perhaps their most profound statement of all. We must be careful not to over-romanticize the reality. The pirate's life was brutal, it was violent, it was chaotic, and it was almost always short. But it was free. This, in the end, is their true legacy. The enduring, romantic appeal of their story is not just about the adventure or the fictional gold. It is about the fundamental human desire for freedom, the call of the horizon, the dream of a life where you are your own master. And so, as our ship sails on into the mists of history, we leave this incredible, complex, and revolutionary story behind. The single pirate sloop, a speck on the vast ocean, becomes a symbol, sailing peacefully into the sunset, into myth. Tonight, we sailed with the brethren of the coast. We saw their ferocity, but we also saw their fairness. We saw their rebellion, and we understood, perhaps, the brutal world they were fighting against. Their golden age was so very brief, a fleeting flash of defiant freedom on the turquoise sea, but their story and their radical dream of a life without masters has become immortal. I hope this journey has brought you peace, deep relaxation, and perhaps some fascinating dreams. Thank you so much for spending this time with me tonight. If you have enjoyed our voyage, a like or a subscription is always so deeply appreciated. It helps our community grow, and it truly means the world to me. May your rest be deep and your dreams be adventurous. Until our next story, sleep well.